All right, before I get into the specifics of the budget build setup, I'm going to really quickly show the actual build planner thingy thing. I have updated it for some budget setups, so the way you see them, you can see the notes will tell you some stuff down here. But the passive tree skills and equipment all have separate sections, sets that you can do. So there's a budget gear set. You can tab through this, the budget skills set, and you can also see a passive tree for the budget set. Some of it's very similar, some of it's a bit different. But I'm going to be covering all the things here. Just wanted to show that if that's all you care about, if you just want to see the setup and you don't need the explanations, it's there. Do keep in mind that max roll is still bugged on a handful of unique items, and some of the unique stats don't really show properly. So, finally, after many people asked about it, I finally put together my own budget setup for the Pillar HoWA Gemling build. Now, budget is not necessarily cheap. My goal was 20-25 divines for the build, and that's like 25 D for the gear, the gems, and the jewels, like everything combined. And I was able to do that. Now, is this the strongest build at like a 20 divine price point? No, I doubt it. The point was to be strong enough to start farming actual endgame like T15 content that gives decent currency for farming it, that you can actually start to farm your way towards the bigger upgrades and like the heavy scaling that the attribute stacking builds do. Because as you get more and more upgrades, it just gets crazy how strong it is, even though from this point it's already plenty playable in T15s and does pretty well. So, we had some goals for this budget setup. I wanted to get resist capped, which I basically did on 2% off fire res. Get some okay chaos res, which I think 41% right now is plenty. Chaos damage doesn't seem too threatening at the moment. Get a little bit of mana, which helps us stay alive because that's basically our health pool from just like flat mana rolls on gear. And then after that, just as many attributes as I can without, breaking the budget, breaking the bank. And again, I wanted to be able to run tier 15 maps with things like Breach or whatever with a bit of investment so that you're actually getting loot. I did some playing with this today. I played it for about like 3 hours on stream, and I didn't change my Atlas trees at all. Like I had some pretty rippy stuff up in like the full trees for like full difficulty, and it was able to hang just fine. I think it did just great. So here are the numbers of everything that I bought into the budget. You can see I have a total cost. It was just shy of 20 divines. With divines at the current price, it was like 68x each. Character level 86 is because I essentially intentionally de-leveled my character. I can't really de-level, but I unspec'd a bunch of passive points because doing a budget setup on a character that has 96 levels of passives felt weird. And then you can see the breakdown of all the items. A lot of it's quite cheap. The gloves obviously are a huge chunk of the cost. Getting a body armor was a little bit, but not too bad. Buying all this stuff took probably like an hour on stream, just getting all the different pieces together from nothing. Which wasn't too bad because I was also like trying to, you know, figure out what I wanted as I went and keeping the budget in mind and trying not to scam myself. I also didn't like offer anybody. I just bought everything at the listed prices. So here's all the gear. I got a pillar with 3 sockets instead of the extra weapon damage corruption. This was dirt cheap, like 5 exalts. Whereas I think one with 2 sockets and the weapon damage corruption was like 2 divines. This gets pretty close in power for almost none of the cost. Just bought a random Hand of Wisdom in action. That was, 9x or 9 div rather. Nothing special about it, just mediocre rolls. My jewelry were just rings. I wanted to get a decent amount of my resists off the rings, and then as much. I wanted all attributes and int, which I got on each of them. This one got a little bit of all res. This one got a bit of the lightning res, and then this one's on a fire res base. For the resists, I wanted to primarily do all resistances, but I knew that that wouldn't be that realistic because if I had to search for all res on every piece of gear, it would restrict what I could find and it would make it more expensive. So what I did was I went for a singular roll of fire, cold, and lightning res across the gear. So like the ring has some fire res, this ring has some lightning res, and my belt has some cold res. And then other than that, I did basically stuff with all res, and that got us to our essentially capped resists. Yeah, so the rings got those, and then they both had a little bit of mana on them, which is a nice bonus over some of the other listings. The body armor, I went for one with all res and not with attributes, even though you would think I want attributes. It's actually just so beneficial to get an all res one to fix the resist, because like attributes are our damage and all, but we do need resist so we just don't die. And then I found one that had also mana as the second stat, mana good, and didn't add anything to the cost. Like without mana it was 2 div, with mana it was 2 div. Black Sun Crest just got one that wasn't as crazy rolled. These get extremely cheap, extremely fast as you go down from like near perfect. The amulet's a bit more interesting. I did prioritize getting specifically plus all attributes on the amulet because that stat rolls way higher on amulet than on anything else. Like you can see 21 all, so that's like 60 total stats is really good. And then kind of same with all res on amulet rolls pretty high. So probably really nice to get both of those. And then this one had a little bit of strength. No int, but whatever. And then some mana. The belt had the one piece with like chaos res on it. And then I checked for strength because that's the only attribute you can normally get on belts. And I think I bought the belt before maybe at least one of the rings. So I just needed a res, and I found one with cold res. And that was how I dictated where I needed the other stuff. And then the boosts are pretty much just 2 stats, mana, move speed. These were like also surprisingly very, 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 very cheap. The socket stuff, gloves, boots, helmets, all had chaos res. Body armor has Ellie res. It was basically, just good enough Ellie res to get capped. And then I think I showed the pillar has attack speed. Yeah, so all that was like surprisingly affordable overall. And a decent amount of the cost actually ends up being like gems and stuff. Which I kind of just have my gems, but like I took all the 6 links out. The gem setup is almost identical to my setup that I used in my build overview, just higher level stuff. It's just it's all the same thing but like weaker. And the max roll, if you want to see all the specific gems, it's in the max roll planner. One big thing compared to my current character, I've recently switched to using Tempest Flurry to clear, because when you get lots of dexterity, it actually moves really fast, like faster than you can run. The budget setup does not get that speed. So Tempest Flurry is basically benched. I still have it on my bars and I used it. You can use it for single target. It's better single target than Stormwave because it can pop Tempest spells faster. I don't like using it that much for single target on this setup because it just locks you in place too much when it name locks. But it is a thing, but you don't want it for clear. So for clear, we're back to just running around and Stormwaving. And it essentially plays out, like in actual gameplay, the same as it did in my build overview video as well. It's just everything is worse. Like I'm a budget version. I'm squishier. I do less damage. I'm slower. Just it's the same thing but just weaker. But it's strong enough to do the maps that I wanted it to do, which is really good. I think that kind of covers all the stuff of the setup. So again, the total cost came in under 20 div. Yeah, things could change. It could get higher if more people go for budget setups. I've got a map here. It's got a boss. This map actually has some extra damage on it too. Hopefully I don't mess it up, but you can see how it plays out. Unlike my really OP gear, I actually have to kind of play the game again. Can't just fully brain off. But it does, for the most part, just wipe out trash mobs in one big swoop. Like the AoE is still super high, even at this level of stats, which I guess I should show the stats. My strength is 203, my dex 225, my int is 570. You have so much room to grow, which is great, because the way the attribute stacking works, I think it just gets stronger and stronger with really good scaling. But the mapping is pretty basic. It's very easy mapping again, although you do have to actually pay attention at this point. Like with if you're doing like any juiced up content, like the normal trash mobs are fine, right? When I get into like the crazy breaches with all the breach passives adding density and damage and all that, or if I fight a map boss and I have my deadly evolution and all the Atlas boss passives, it gets a little nasty. But we're pretty much just chilling. I think I was able to farm like a breach stone, just kind of not even necessarily trying to push. I was able to get a breach stone worth of splinters in, I don't know, an hour and a half of mapping or something, maybe a little bit more. But it's like it shows that it's good enough to get pretty good farming going. And I wasn't upgrading anything. Like in the few hours that I played it on stream, I could have already upgraded multiple pieces from where I started. Like if I assume I had 0 currency left and then I just needed to upgrade, like I probably could have upgraded both of my rings. Speaking of rings, I also realized after the fact, I never put any quality on any of this jewelry, which is actually one of the cheaper things you can do that's really cost effective, I think, because the catalysts cost next to nothing. I could have got some free attributes, so I could be a bit stronger here for very, very little extra cost. I can show here Tempest Flurry. You can see like Tempest Flurry works. If you really wanted to use this, you could. It's not faster at this point in progression than just running around. But like if you wanted, if you're dead set on playing it like this, you could do it. Alright, we got the boss. I do have to do like my actual DPS rotations on the bosses and dodge at the same time. We do that. And then once you get it going, the burst goes in hard and we're able to kill him, so that's good. But it has like the same downfalls as the higher investment setup where like mana sustain isn't good, so if you get hit it's hard to refill it. And some of the stuff when you're like setting up the combo, you might be a little bit immobile, so you might be taking hits. The thing is, in the higher investment, once you get more and more gear, you kind of just stat check those downsides and they don't become as relevant. Whereas in this, they kind of are a bit relevant. Something to keep in mind. As far as like other boss stuff, I was able to do, I did a difficulty 2 Breach Lord on the character. And I hadn't actually really fought that boss at all outside of with a character that just overpowered it too much. I tried once on my Witch Hunter and my game crashed, and that character would have been the only one that would have had an actual fight against it. But I was able to do it without dying, even though I didn't really know the fight. Ooh, we're getting chunked here. Gotta be careful, I gotta focus on the breach. Because this is where stuff gets nasty. Especially with extra damage on the map. As long as I'm actually paying attention. I might not get every single mob in the breach because we're just not quick enough. But as long as I play carefully, I can still wipe them out pretty well. And you can see like this, again, this is with maximum breach investment on my tree, so it's like as hard as they get. We get pretty good splinter farm. And I think that's like kind of the main thing that I see as how to farm currency outside of like magic finding is doing this kind of side content and getting things like splinters and whatever the boss invite access stuff, and whether you run it yourself or whether you sell it. I think that's like the most consistent way to farm currency at the moment. Okay, it's just that one. And again, if I played this more and it was like, okay, maybe some of the stuff's a little bit too hard, there's like things that I could unspec or change on the Atlas tree and all that to make it not quite as rippy until we powered up a tiny bit more. Because like there's not much reason to do things that are just too hard. But I think that's the whole map basically. And yeah, I mean, again, it's not the strongest by any means, but like it gets it done. I think it gets the job done. We got almost 30 splinters. Like 30 splinters I think is like almost 8x. So like pretty close to 8x just off splinters from one map, and that's a pretty normal amount to get. You can farm up pretty decently with it, I think, currency wise, and get to the future upgrades, which is kind of the last thing to go over, would be the future upgrades of the build. So none of it's set in stone. You can kind of do whatever, really, just getting better gear. And like if you look at my other parts on the build planner, you can see what the higher investment setups look like. But on this character currently, what I think I would focus on, I think getting really solid rings, like my rings combined were half a divine orb. And then getting some a bit better. You know, maybe one with like a higher all res roll, and then maybe one with like triple attributes or whatever. Maybe even trying to get a breach ring. whatever, like getting pretty good ring upgrades and then getting the Ingenuity unique belt, I think is a really good first thing to push towards because the value off the Ingenuity is just super, super high for the build. And the price of the Ingenuity belts have actually gone down quite a bit. They're not too bad for, at least for the amount of power you get, it's pretty crazy. So I think those would be really nice. And then from there, I don't think I would put a lot of focus into the amulet. If you get one with like good all attributes in like some res and a single attribute like this one has, like I don't know that I would do much to this until like an Astra Menace even. But you could potentially save up for body armor to get the one that has attributes and res. They're pretty expensive. The boots, honestly, I wouldn't mess with too much either for a while. But you could do things like you could get the pillar with the extra weapon damage per strength corruption instead. That'll give you some DPS. And then aside from that, like obviously getting your 6 links is just going to be damage because you have plenty of gems to put in the sockets because Gemling lets you use double support. So that'd be a good thing to get for some damage. And then like against the darkness with percent int probably, and then like some useful second stat, whatever it may be. You can get like this is pretty expensive for lightning damage. You could get like strength or dex or cold damage, or there's like one for small nodes give chaos res. Like there's a lot of options there. That's probably also a pretty good one. Maybe you go for grand spectrums early on and you ditch like any resists on your rings and you can make that work out. That would also be a pretty good option. But eventually you should get to a point where your Tempest Flurry is faster than running in Storm Waving. And if you want to do that for mapping, that's when you will really, really take off. You definitely can do it once you get an Astra Menace, but obviously Astra Menace is like the big, big, big item that costs a ton. Yeah, whenever you get that, you can. But I think that covers it. Budget setup was a good success, I think. I'm pretty happy with how it performed and how like it wasn't really that hard to put the gear together. Like again, it's nothing crazy. It's not like the most OP build, but it's just with how it scales. Because I think most people playing this are going to and should want to like eventually get to like the higher investment levels because it's where the build really shines. Because it just is able to take advantage of some crazy stuff. And this is definitely good enough to get you decently well farming some currency to progress towards that point. So yeah. I will have like the build plan or whatever, it's linked down in the description and all that. Good stuff. Hope the video was useful. Hope it was informational. And thanks for watching. See ya.